Bet.
But continues. I said this. We just have things.
Right.
And I said our community was one of the only communities that voted. Why don't we want to vote? And I said, well, you have to realize gas hasn't been.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for February 21st, 2023. On our agenda this evening, we have a City Council Goals Update and the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan. And we'll get right into it.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Can I share my screen? Is it
Microphone's on?
okay?
And then real close to us.
Good evening again. I'm Jen Newton, Senior Project Manager for the City Manager's Office, and we will have presentations from a number of staff members this evening. Liz Axford, Ben Anderson, Diane Foster, Matthew Gillen, Megan Monahan, Jennifer Phelan, Rob Schober, Tessa Schreiner, Tim Carps, Claire McLaughlin, Ainsley Brosnan-Smith, CJ Oliver, and there are others in audience who can answer questions as we have them. Just looking back, we, City Council adopted goals in 2021, and we had a comprehensive update last year at the end of summer, and this is another comprehensive update on all three goal areas. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Diane.
As you know, council went through, edited, and then eventually adopted by resolution the Housing Strategic Plan in April of 2022. That followed the December 2021 full-day City Council housing retreat. So out of that housing retreat, staff took feedback from council, formed that into a draft plan. Council had a couple meetings on it and eventually adopted it in April. As you all know, the plan includes a goal of 500 affordable housing units, and the goal is broken down into the specific 14 action points. And as I do regularly explain to people, on Friday, a number of us were meeting with a group that's working with the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition on a grant, and I had to explain to them it's different from traditional strategic plans that don't include action, because this City Council said we need this plan to be action-oriented. Thank you.
So there are a few goals that are part of that strategic plan that are not otherwise represented in the affordable housing goal, so I just wanted to bring those forward. One is financial resources for construction for affordable housing. And in terms of progress, the STR tax was approved by voters in November, and the ballot question dedicated the use of tax to be at least 70% dedicated to affordable housing. And we do know now who are the tax remitters in each of the categories. The 5% short-term rental, owner-occupied or lodge-exempt permitted properties, and then the 10% on the overnight stays for those that are in the category of investment, second home owner, classic permitted properties. And finance will assess what the rental activity looks like in the next few months. The estimated revenue for the first full year is $8 to $9 million, and that translates into revenue for approximately 4 new units a year, or maybe 60 units if you use the revenue stream to borrow at a 30-year term. And so we would anticipate once those revenues start to come in that there would be an additional conversation with City Council about spending those dollars.
All right, the next action item is expiring deed restrictions, which we have talked about previously. So as many of us already know, in Aspen, Pickens County, there are over 300 deed restrictions with sunset dates on them. And staff has the goal to preserve as many of these as possible, thereby preserving these as affordable housing units. So right now, deed restrictions are still being replaced underneath the ongoing method where automatically we replace the deed restriction when there's property turnover, deed transfer. So this number is actually one less than last time. We brought this up in November just because one property was sold and the deed restriction was overturned. And staff across departments are just still working on this goal right now. We're working to outline and model different strategies that can preserve as many of these expiring deed restrictions as possible.
And then partnerships are identified also in the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan. One ongoing, One ongoing effort related to partnerships is looking at the Forest Service lot, which is located at Hallam Street and 7th Street. The agreement is still under negotiation, and we anticipate that there could be affordable housing units there if we are successful in moving that forward.
I'll start the next one, but do know when Jen was Assistant City Manager in Glenwood, she was part of the founding of West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition, which is the new name for the, and the formal name for the non-incorporated nonprofit, which is the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. Liz has also been attending meetings virtually to stay on top of what's going on. Right now, the group has been successful in acquiring several grants and doing work to define what type of work does the group want to start on. One of the things that I think is particularly exciting for the city of Aspen is we didn't put buy-downs in our program because buy-downs within the city of Aspen are really difficult when it's not really possible to buy even a studio for less than 1.2 million or more at this point. But however, the coalition is looking at and has outlined a program for doing buy-downs and is currently seeking funding for it. So that would be something that would be available to somebody who worked in Aspen but might want to buy down Valley. That is one of the programs that we've outlined and that we're seeking funding for right now. There's also a lot of work going on to just board formation and how the organization works. I'll hand it over to Jen to add what you think would make sense.
And we have a quick question, actually.
Yeah, it's a comment and a question and observation. Over the years, I think we've all seen sticker shock from some of these deed restrictions, and we thought perhaps $10 million at Centennial, we thought we had a deal done on that. That fell through. We looked at purchasing all of Centennial. We thought that was pretty expensive. That fell through. So I'd like to get some kind of baseline or guidelines. What would be reasonable for a buy down for, let's say, a studio, a whole city lot? What would be reasonable for redevelopment opportunities on a 7,500 square foot lot on an existing structure as a buy down to give us some kind of so we're not going out and looking at the new SUV that is electrified and it's $70,000 and we go, whoa. So when we look at something that's projected to being $10 million and 5 years later, we're going, we should have done it for 20. So it's a for this council and future councils, it's always a challenge to try to be penny wise when we wound up being pound foolish.
Sure, and let me reiterate that for this initial program, while it would be open to someone who wanted to buy in Aspen, the anticipation is that it probably wouldn't be an Aspen purchase. However, because it would be a valley-wide program, someone could work in Aspen and purchase in Carbondale, for example. When we outlined the program, right, these are not firm numbers, nothing's been adopted because there's nothing funded, but we were looking in the $300,000 range as what to offer for buy downs.
Just to clarify, and I know we don't need to get deep into this policy, but it's similar structure where there's a private buyer who wants to buy something free market, can't afford it. We're giving a portion of that in exchange for a deed restriction?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I would just mention that the coalition has a grant that they're working on that includes a policy scan across the Roaring Fork Valley. So last week, many of our staff members participated in that effort so that there's a comprehensive look at what the affordable housing strategies are and land use codes and how that interfaces with kind of those strategic elements that the state wants to see. The carrot versus the stick model related to land use. So there was a grant funding last year that was available for these kinds of programs, and the Housing Coalition is pursued that and is working to get that across the finish line.
Great.
And then I think that's it for our slide, so we'll hand it over to Rob.
drive, or?
You drop.
Okay.
Good evening, Rob Schober, Capital Asset Director. I have an update here for you tonight on Burlingame Ranch Phase 3, which is 79-unit condo complex, which is the final big construction piece of the Burlingame PUD, currently under construction. So progress and next steps is we will be finalizing construction. I'm hoping to have that complete late summer, early fall. You'll be getting an update in late March on sales and a right-sizing proposal, and we'll also talk a little bit more about the approach to lotteries with APSHA. Then the lumberyard housing project. It's 11 acres of land just south of the ABC. It's a total of 277 units, which right now is planned to be built over 3 phases, starting in 2027 and ending in 2031. Currently, we have submitted a complete land use application, and then we're expecting to have land use hearings here second quarter of 2023. And then depending on the outcome of those hearings, the plan is to start deconstruction and recycling of the existing facilities, which is the lumberyard itself, and the Aspen mini storage in 2024. And then what we're calling phase 0 of that project rolling on into that, which is a big access and infrastructure construction project to get ready for the buildings.
Yeah, just wondering, and Chris Everson might be the one to ask as opposed to you, but do we have a rough range of when the Burlingame 3 units are sold, what will the revenue be returning to the housing fund?
Yes, I'm looking at Pete because we modeled it for the budget.
Okay.
And I can pull up the budget if you want me to, Pete.
And I realize that there may be final changes or something like that.
BG 379 units, what are estimated revenue from sales?
12.5.
12.5 million, just so that our folks at home can hear it.
Thank you.
Jen, do you want to talk about this one? Let me take it.
Jen, can you hit that button again, please?
Okay. So we're looking at converting the old Mountain Rescue property on Main Street to a duplex to add 2 units to the city's employee housing inventory. Currently, we're looking at applying for land use approval, submitting an application no later than April. We'll go through that process. It'll be a couple-month process. We expect to have construction documents ready in April also, so once we get land use approvals, we'll be able to submit for a building permit. We are doing some cost estimating in between just to make sure we stay on target for a budget. And if everything goes smoothly, we're planning on starting construction in 2024.
All right, here's the third rail. I know it's, I'm going to throw it out there anyway. That is Aspen Modern. And what are our opportunities to increase the use of that asset if it were delisted as an Aspen Modern?
Well, right now, I would say that the Panabode is a 1-story, 600-square-foot building at the front of the property, so you're not going to be able to build above it, or a 2-story, a building to that. So you would have more development potential if that building was not listed.
Yeah, I just want to fully explore what our possibilities are and to be able to weigh the value of that as a historic asset of Panabode. There are a number of Panabodes that are in our historic Aspen Modern inventory, and to fully evaluate what we can build on that parcel if it were not Aspen Modern, as opposed to retaining the Aspen Modern designation. I'm not looking for an answer here tonight.
Rachel, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I can understand at a level the urgency on housing need and how to look everywhere. At the same time, I think we set the example for our own community. And what you're saying to me is that no one should save Aspen Modern Homes because they can build more if they have it. Oh, I know you're talking about the city, but we set the example. And if we're trying to say, but we can get more maximum value by demolishing modern Aspen Moderns or changing them in such a way that it would never pass HPC as a deal, I think we'd be setting the wrong example. But what I think at a different level you might be saying is, are there any other city properties, city land that we own that could be looked at to be creating housing on? And so I would support that type of look. Others have suggested starting to cannibalize open space that the community has put together over the years, and I think those sort of things are protected by voter approval, requiring like-kind replacement and a public vote for use of any public open space that was spurt with open space funds. But there may be other properties that the city owns that don't have those sort of designations. But I, for one, would not want to be leading the example to say Aspen Modern doesn't really matter. And for me, the location of that on Main Street really matters. It doesn't matter to me that there's 3 panaboats buried over in the West End. This is the Main Street entrance to town, and the character of the town is reflected on Main Street. So, others certainly can weigh in as to whether we want staff to do those sort of exercises, but I'm a no.
I'm not looking, I would like to have some kind of open dialogue amongst the council, not at this moment. But, and I'm not looking for staff to do a whole dive into it. If we don't have some kind of support on the council to at least look at that, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think we owe it to ourselves to have that discussion.
Well, are you talking about just not pursuing Aspen Modern? I mean, it already is designated. What is the delisting process so it could be demolished? Or just so we could do a different type of addition?
There are a number of options. The asset could be moved. That would give us more opportunity, but moving it like we did the Zapanzas, or discussions about other, there have been other historic assets that have moved. There's one up by Park, as you recall, was moved a couple of times. So to really evaluate what options are available to us and what is the best use of taxpayer dollars to develop workforce housing and weigh that against the value of and perhaps you're indicating that the location of this historic asset is what's important. I've heard that from other examples, and then it gets moved and it gets moved again. So I don't know if it's the asset itself, the location, but some kind of a meaningful discussion about that.
All right. Skippy, comment there?
Yeah, just a brief comment, Ward, because I was open to looking at this originally. I always want to see what the most housing we can get is. And even if you were to do that, what I remember seeing in sort of the initial sketch of what is possible, the total number of units delivered, which if memory serves was 4 versus the anticipated price given the site constraints, made it as such that as just a per dollar rational investment versus other housing opportunities, it was far underneath what we could deliver. And so for that reason, I thought we should keep the resource and look elsewhere for those kind of opportunities.
Sarah, do you have any input on this? We touched on this in some of our reviews and work sessions previously.
Yeah, I remember looking at it.
Sure, the direction staff's received is to preserve the panaboat in its current location. We're currently doing some historic analysis and structural analysis on what we have there today to understand what's its retrofit possibilities. And that's part of what Jen's alluding to in understanding for sure our costs. And so we can bring that back to you. Actually, we anticipated bringing it back to you before a final decision before we go out to bid on that. However, we have done the preliminary analysis that if the Panabode was not there, what does it do? There are some site constraints, particularly around parking and meeting the parking requirements for that area that, come into play in the density conversation as well, that we would bring back to you for the site. Jen, do you want to add anything?
No, I mean, we had looked at, you're looking at just a very different project of a remodel versus a redevelopment where you'd be, even where we looked at possibly adding a third unit that was tearing off the rear addition and digging down. And it's just a different project than what we're proceeding with at the moment.
So our understanding was that you wanted to preserve the historic asset, and that's what's in the policy resolution, and that we would not maximize the housing units on the property and understanding that trade-off already. So that's what you've adopted and directed us. Again, if you'd like to review that direction, we can bring it back to you. And we think maybe bringing it back to you with cost information just to check in with you, since this is the 550 fund, is an important step because it is not general community housing money. This is specific money for housing employer-sponsored workers.
Yeah, I'd like to see that cost analysis, and I want to be fully informed.
Others?
I'm just recalling when we discussed this, I think what we moved forward was based on, again, the parking limitations and preserving the Panabode, and I was happy with the 2 units that were presented. Ward's brought up an interesting point, though, and it seems like we found a solution to that.
Yeah, to double check it. So we will provide an information-only memo. I'm not hearing enough that rises to the work session. But you can let us know after that comes that info-only memo if it does need to come to work session. Would that be an all right process, Council?
Sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay. Thanks,
Thank
Ward.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, guys.
Sorry. Yeah, would you?
Thanks, Jen.
Keeps going to Bing for some reason. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Ben Anderson from Community Development. ComDev's been doing a lot of work around affordable housing within the land use code for the last few years, and I think that culminated particularly with the passage and adoption of Ordinance 13 coming out of the moratorium. And, I think one of the things, that was a little surprising to me as that ordinance passed and the community discussion around it was just the really significant progress that we made around further encouragement of affordable housing development within the land use code. Creating an administrative process for compliant projects, allowing for some additional density across our residential zone districts in town, and then removal of unintended obstacles and inconsistency through land use code that, whether we intended or not, were having a discouraging effect, particularly in the commercial core and some of our commercial zones for the potential of affordable housing. So I think that those were some really big changes. We haven't had any projects yet that have used these provisions, but we've had some interest in people asking questions. What does this mean? How might this change the project that we were thinking about? And then next steps, next week, you're going to be seeing a policy resolution in front of you, following up on a work session conversation we had on December 12th around the Affordable Housing Credits Program. Council gave some very clear direction during that conversation about some possible changes and improvements to that program, and staff following that policy resolution will be working on a targeted code amendment around the things that we talked about on December 12th. I would also say, just in support of some of the things that have been previously discussed, ComDev is making some great progress on the entitlements review for the lumberyard project, the encouragement of some small credits projects that are in the works right now. And I think that kind of summarizes our work on the affordable housing topic right now. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ben? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Matthew Gillen from the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority. So one of the council goals was continuous improvement. and part of that is the voluntary right sizing. We have analyzed, based on Home Track, that there are a number of spare bedrooms in the APSHA inventory, so we're seeking to maximize that, that asset. So we're looking at ways to encourage people to free up some of their assets and downsize. So the initial way we're doing that is a swap model. So people who have a big house, and people who own a small house, they would essentially buy each other's houses. It'd be two separate transactions. And we were asking the APSHA board to give us permission for 5 voluntary swaps. The APSHA board has formally voted that that will be a voluntary process, and I'm saying the word voluntary a lot because we really want to ram that home, that any process will not be compulsory, and we're not forcing anybody to give up their home. We're also working with our colleagues on doing a similar thing for Burlingame 3. You might think 5 is kind of a small number. It is, but we want to iron out some of the kinks in the program, see what really needs to be done, gauge some interest, and really see, what we need to do on that. Okay.
And council, just real quick, the request that for consideration of some Burlingame 3 units by APSHA for right sizing will come before you at the March 28th, March 27th work session for direction to the city staff. Thank you. Thank you.
Board? Yeah, this is more for the public. That seems like during election season we get a lot of comments and criticisms, which is to be expected, I guess, but just the understanding of how the city of Aspen and APSHA interfaces. That city council does not set the goals or policies for APSHA. We have one voting member on the board. We can make recommendations, but we do not set policy for APSHA. We don't enforce. It's an APSHA process, and I just wanted the public to be aware of that.
And if you could go back a slide. I was just wondering, we've gotten the data around 580 bedrooms. Are there any, and this can wait till we have a work session, but I guess in the interim, I would just love for some thought to be looking at similar situations. Because right now we're talking about one action, which is the right sizing. But are there other situations that are existing that is not the solution that would get those bedrooms to be occupied and used? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really the idea behind the initial test, is to cast the net wide and then narrow the focus as we learn from experience.
And we do have some procedures already in place. People have a spare bedroom. They can put an APSHA qualified roommate in there. We put that in the latest newsletter. We reminded people about that. So there are a few other things, but yes, absolutely. We'll look at any means, reasonable means to try and get access to those spare bedrooms.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't have it on my computer to quickly pull up, but there was an analysis done of the 580 spare bedrooms, and a significant number were projects that were not city or county produced per se, such as the North 40. It was a private sector development. They could build the number of bedrooms they wanted, and they never had a maximum occupancy. The same is true with the mobile home parks that were converted and saved. And other projects such as Williams Ranch right above us, that was again private sector. So, I think that as we present this number in the future, I'd love to have it segregated out. It was particularly valuable analysis now that we have policy analysts taking a look at some of the housing issues, because it was kind of trying to see what role retirement played in empty bedrooms and just aging over the length of the time you owned a unit. And it was clearly a component and a consideration. But when we look at the very large number of 580, a lot of it has to do with units that never required a maximum occupancy of one person in each bedroom when they were developed by the private sector or preserved through buyouts. So just wanted to put that out there.
Rachel makes an excellent point. That doesn't necessarily mean those 580 spare bedrooms are spare in any meaningful sense. You know, there are places where there's no obligation at all, even when you come into the property.
In the interest of let's not always be serious, has APSHA considered having retirees adopt millennials?
Interesting. I'll consider it.
Okay.
Yeah, as the millennial, not as the grandparent.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for those comments. I appreciate it.
Adoptive home, but
All right.
So I just want to highlight the seller standards, which came into effect last year. So that is, part of that is all APSHA properties that are sold now do have an independent home inspection, which provides, you know, objective information on the state of the property. And that policy is working extremely well. We're also encouraging, this one doesn't, yeah, this does fit with housing sustainability, excuse me. People who signed under the new deed restriction, their updated purchase price under that deed restriction gives them the 10% capital improvements based on the updated value. So that's another way we're trying to increase the sustainability. The pilot grant program we're currently discussing over at the APSHA board, and that is an idea that we would give homeowners access to some funds to upgrade, particularly emergency repairs. We're thinking in terms of boilers, broken windows, that kind of thing. And that will be going back, I think, at the next APSHA board meeting. There was, we've been noodling with it about who exactly would apply to, what level of income, of assets it would go to. And then once that's been approved if it's approved by the APSHA board, we'll be approaching the Aspen City Council and the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners to see if they would like to help fund that.
So my comment and my notes on this one is this is for individual units, not HOAs?
Correct.
And it's a grant without
Yes.
expectation?
As written right now, it's a grant.
Okay.
Yeah, the discussion on the board has been, should there be means testing and how high up in categories does it go and things like that. Of course, they'd have to be APSHA-approved repairs. I've mentioned at the table before, but I want to go backwards just for a half second on what you kind of glossed over, Matthew. The fact that APSHA has a new deed restriction available for existing unit owners to essentially upgrade to or change is part of the process of potentially eliminating the expiring deed restrictions as well as maintaining the quality of the units. And what it offers is for someone to come in and look at what their current appreciated sales price would be, and then cash out at that point essentially and maintain that as their new base to begin appreciation. But they would be taking on a new deed restriction that did not expire and would then increase what they're allowed to add to their unit for capital repairs. So it's offering a benefit to those people to consider getting rid of the old deed restriction that would expire. And at the same time, and a good example might be myself, in that I bought a unit over 30 years ago for around $60,000 or $64,000. My 10% capital improvement budget would not replace a bathroom of $6,000. I mean, 10% of $6,000 is nothing in today's dollars for repairing a unit. But it's a possibility for anyone with an expiring deed restriction to increase that capital improvement budget and be able to add it to their unit. What you do put in capital like that can depreciate or back down over time. So it doesn't necessarily all stay there if you stayed in the unit for 20 years, but it's an incentive, both for right sizing and for maintaining your unit and getting rid of older deed restrictions. And we're just still gauging the response on that. We're pushing it out one more time, and then I think the board would look at, is it sufficient, or are there other things they need to do? Thank you.
Excuse my ignorance here. There are 323 expiring deed restrictions. I was of the assumption that most of those are rentals.
It's about 180, I believe, that are rentals, but I'll pull up my notes.
Yeah.
Right, and then carrying on with housing sustainability, we are going to be developing our contacts with the 80 or more homeowner associations under the APSHA umbrella, and we are dusting off our program from over a decade ago where APSHA helped pay for funding for capital assessment needs, not the actual work, but just seeing where the HOAs are. So that's going to be a year or so process, but we're going to be working very hard on that. And I think it's also indicative of the need to develop excellent relationships with our HOA partners. That's extremely important. So the goal is capital needs assessment, but virtue is its own reward. So we need to have an excellent relationship with our colleagues over in the HOAs.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment about that. I really appreciate you commencing with that work. I recognize that it's going to be a while, but I think this is, we're taking a real holistic view at our housing program as well as our housing inventory. And, the age of our housing inventory is of the time frame that we're going to be seeing a lot of capital improvements being necessary. So I'm really happy that we are looking at that as one of the prongs that we're trying to attack this problem
Great,
with.
thank you.
John?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Did I hear you say 80 HOAs?
Yes, it's a lot.
I just want everybody to let that sink
Yeah,
in for a
it's a
second.
lot of them.
That is a level of complexity that is
And they're not all the same size either.
exactly. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good highlight.
Okay, so we're going on to
Deal
compliance.
with one.
There are 3 main requirements to rent or own an APSHA unit: work 1,500 hours a year in Pitkin County, live in your unit, and not own another developed home between Aspen and Rifle, the owner exclusion zone. So all compliance really is making sure people are following those very simple rules. We are hiring a new compliance analyst. In fact, breaking news, we extended an offer on Friday, and that person has accepted. So I'm not going to give away too many details because, there's the HR process, but we have a very wonderful candidate. I'm very excited. Hopefully that'll all work out. The hearing officer process, we're still working our way through that. That was really got going again last year, and that takes the pressure away from the APSHA board, who used to do the actual hearings. So now we have a neutral hearing officer who does most of the work, and then there is a paper review of that process by the APSHA board if there is an appeal. And we haven't actually had that yet. We thought we were going to have one, but then they went straight to court, but that's fine. And we are also tracking compliance cases on the APSHA website, and that says in the future. It's actually up there now. They are scrubbed of any personal identifiable information. That is to give the public a transparent view of the kind of thing we're working on. And we are doing the biannual affidavit for owners. That is happening this year. And then that'll be a tool for our new compliance manager to follow up on some of those answers, perhaps with a little bit of auditing to dig in a little deeper on how people are doing. So that's for owners. Every 2 years, they have to just promise that they are following those 3 rules, and that's a legally binding document. Thank you. And this, again, something I wanted to highlight is our ongoing communication efforts. I think the most important one I've seen so far is the newsletter, which we're doing 3 times a year. It just came out 2 weeks ago, and we're doing that in English and Spanish. We published in that my essay from December 2022, which was in the local papers, which I thought was a very straightforward view of what APSHA actually is and what we do and do not do. We are highlighting some of those efforts on Facebook Live, and also on Facebook. We have a Mythbusters program to try and counter some of the more egregious myths about APSHA. For example, the one highlighted is I can work anywhere in the world from APSHA housing, which is of course not correct. The 1,500 hours in Pitkin County still apply, even if you're working at home. And we'll be working on in-person meet and greets, as well as these virtual and newsletter processes. Following on Richard Pryor's very popular Coffee with Cops, maybe breakfast with bureaucrats, but we'll maybe I'll have to come up with a catchy name. I'll work on the name. And I think is that it? Yes, any general housing questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could clarify. So where we're at is that there's 80 ownership units representing 156 bedrooms that have some version of expiring deed requirement that meets the 3 criteria that Matthew just outlined about hours worked, the physical location in Pitkin County, living in the unit, et cetera. In terms of rental units, there's 244 units that represent 313 bedrooms that the resident has to meet those same 3 requirements. Now, there's some nuance to Smuggler Park. It has a very old deed restriction that does not match the current expectations. So those have expiring deed restrictions. However, there is not the work requirement. There's only 2 requirements, not 3
Resident
on those. So
occupied.
they're handled differently. So that's why staff time at the city has been focused primarily on those 244 rental units as the strategy development area. I will tell you, an enormous amount of those are, as we all know, in Centennial rental.
Yeah.
Of that 244, 148 are within the Centennial rental product.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rachel?
I think we're just about done with the housing section of this, but I had a couple of small things to add if we are, so that's okay. I wanted to point out to our board something, again, that I've learned through this process with APSHA, is that, again, many of those separately developed kind of private sector projects do not have to resell their units through APSHA. So that's part of why there's not an APSHA new deed restriction that goes with those units. And that's correct for like the North 40 is what Cindy has said, I think, and I think that may be true with Aspen Village and some of the others. So that's a goal of APSHA to find, again, more incentives within the deed restriction to be able to have them all come up to the same level and the same deed restrictions. But again, those are conversion projects that were done in the county or private sector developments in the county. So that's just kind of interesting. It's so the APSHA can't come back into it to say you have to have 1 person per bedroom, maximum occupancy. Those units are not resold through APSHA. And they do have to follow some of the guidelines in terms of following the program, but they do not have to sell, and there's no commission paid to APSHA. The other thing I wanted to mention was, as we talked about our fundraising or funds efforts, we did talk about the STR tax, but it's worth mentioning that this board did reach out to our colleagues across the street at the Pitkin County building to say, can you guys get involved in the housing game a little more? And I think I read that they've put $5 million of their general fund towards housing contingency to use at some point on something. So we've made a little progress trying to increase the awareness out there. The last thing is just really coming up more for the greater community, maybe Ben and Philip over there and us, but through the Colorado Municipal League meetings that were held on Thursday and Friday, the state is looking at making statewide law to change local control. And it's getting, it's coming to be more real. It seemed like it was not a particularly real proposal, but to eliminate any growth management policies that counties or cities may have, to automatically allow an accessory dwelling unit for any single-family home property. All sorts of proposals about increased density and limitations that would may fit well in a nice flat urban environment like parts of Denver, but are not necessarily suited towards communities of our kind. And an awful lot of unanswered questions about, well, would the accessory dwelling units have to be rented at a AMI, or are they actually new units you can short-term rental? Or will they increase employment demand, or will they help with the workforce shortage? So we really don't know, but that is something that probably won't be decided till beginning of May, when the session ends. And it's just something that our board and others are going to have to track really closely, because it could be one of those, the dangers of unintended consequences of not really getting the result and just kind of grasping at straws and ripping through local control at the same time. Thank you.
Question for Rachel. The North 40, it doesn't go through Aspen, but they have exclusionary, you can't own property within the exclusionary zone.
Yes,
They still have to work,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they have to live there.
They have to live there. It has to be their primary residence and
Okay.
things like that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Matthew.
Matthew.
Good afternoon.
Hello. We're starting off on the childcare topic of childcare, and the first thing we'll be talking about is the Burlingame Child Care Center. On December 5th, we had a work session regarding the schematic design of the Burlingame Early Childhood Center. And the direction that we received from council was to move forward with entitlements for the project. So right now, staff is negotiating and working with the design team to look at what level of service we need contract-wise to get us to an entitled project. We hope to have that wrapped up in the next few weeks, and then we'd need to come back to council for a review of a change order to the contract. Once that happens, we'll be able to tell you more about estimated timeline, process, and how we'll be moving forward.
Jen, can you just remind me of the capacity? And I know it depends on the age of the children, but assuming the highest use in numbers, do we remember?
So if it's seven
Seven classrooms.
classrooms, I
8 to
think
10.
it was around like 80 children total.
Okay, thanks.
Council, as this continues to, we're evaluating again, congressionally directed spending requests. This is the project that was put in last year. I'd encourage us to continue on the path of submitting this project and not jump around between projects. But we are evaluating that right now against other possible needs so that there's only a single request from the city of Aspen to our federal delegation.
Comments?
I was just going to say, I think that's great. I just saw the email this morning from Hickenlooper's office and forwarded it on. And where we are now is knowing this is an expensive project to build, very expensive. And we had changed our focus to finish the entitlements, so would be ready to roll at the appropriate time. But in the meantime, focus on teacher retention and teacher facilities. And so that's kind of where our focus has been. But I do think this is important, and I was just going to say, I don't know if it's worth a conversation, Sarah, with the county. They may have their own specialized need they're planning on applying for, but if it was a joint letter, city and county both applying for childcare support, that would be significant. If, again, they may have other issues, and I know that, but they seem to be aware of the childcare issue, and this might be a more powerful application.
Certainly, we can follow up at the staff level. I have other considerations they have, but I feel like they should represent them, not me to you.
Yeah, no, I know they probably do, but I just thought it is a common area, and we've been told the Healthy Community Fund can't support childcare operations the way they might like it to, but it's not set up that way right now, so maybe this would be a different avenue for them to show support.
across the board, whether it's Yellow Brick or at Burlingame, the staffing is an issue, certainly an issue. We've seen even when we have the Yellow Brick, that being able to move somebody in there immediately is not possible. So I'm proceeding with this with the belief that build it and then they will come, that we'll be able to, or we can at least work on finding staffing for it. We have somebody to run, the Yellow Brick, but we're still looking for staffing on it. So if you get a fully staffed group of people to come in, but you don't have any place for them to have their facility, then they're gone by the time you have the facility. So it's a challenge not only for everybody else, but as Rachel said, we've really focused on trying to backfill and make the early childhood education staffs backfilled. So it is a worthwhile and comfortable income for these people to get engaged in this really important aspect of development, child development. So you got to have the place before you get the people, and having the people and the place at the same time don't always line up easily. So we went through frustrations with the Yellow Brick. Our goal was to increase capacity and accessibility, and it's just not a slam dunk thing.
Right. It is kind of a chicken before the egg thing, and I think that's a really good point. And, we're continuing to move forward. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. If there aren't any more questions for Jen, then you can go sit down, but she's going to stay if there are more. I'm Megan Monahan. I'm co-manager of Kids First. Thanks for taking the time to let us give you an update. Along the same lines of the increasing capacity, increasing available childcare spaces, we have the Yellow Brick, which you were just talking about. So we do have the 4 rooms in the Yellow Brick committed to a program. Ajax Cubs has signed a lease, and they've moved in, and they're opening their first room next Monday. So it'll be a toddler room on Monday. And then they're phasing opening the other classrooms as they get staffed. And they have a pretty good network, so I'm really impressed with how they're finding staffing. And then, so basically, we have been heavily subsidizing them with startup funding, equipment, furniture, and coaching. And we will continue to work with them to encourage that they participate in our grants, our teachers' incentives, and coaching. And they're also participating in the Yellow Brick waiver, which we'll get to next. Well, not next, but we will get to it. So the next project, adding capacity to increase childcare space, is the CNC infant room. And I know I feel like I was just here talking with you. It was December 12th. So they're operating at CMC. Little Steps College is providing childcare for 8 families. We are supporting them by, the build out, for one thing, and then heavily subsidizing startup costs, equipment, much like with Ajax Cubs, and then coaching. And then we'll work to support them in any way we can, including grants and incentives and coaching. So that's the infant room at CMC. And then the last project aimed at increasing childcare capacity is the Preschool of the Arts at the Jewish Community Center. So this is a new program in September. They're serving 8 to 12 families, children 3 to 5 years old. And they actually just applied to expand into a second classroom, which is really great news, right? And we are working with them. They're participating in the Kids First City of Aspen Wage Enhancement Program and also coaching. And they will apply for grants as they become available. So that's a new one.
Question, it's actually a few slides back, but the Ajax Cubs is 200 days per year. Prior,
That's a minimum.
it's the minimum.
That's a minimum.
Do we know how many days per year we were operating the facility before this goal started?
I think that it was probably around the same amount because of days off and operating at 4 days a week. Yeah.
So the key thing, though, is also hours of operation. And so our new operator has much longer operating hours than the previous provider. And again, the 200 minimum, and we can go back and pull the analysis if you went. We went back through and did a pretty thorough look when we were trying to work with the previous tenant.
I'd love to see, like the kind of minimum, and then where we hope to get to. That'd be awesome.
Well, they'll be operating 5 days a week,
Yeah.
and that's just a minimum. And I can bring back next time we come, because
Yeah,
we're
or
coming
just
back.
a memo or something is fine. I'd just like to see
Well, we're coming
it.
back April 24th, so we can let you know what their numbers are, because I know it was in their RFP, the numbers that they wanted to be, the days they were going to be open. It's more than 200 for sure. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So then we talked about the Preschool of the Arts, which is really exciting. Sorry, I'm going too fast. This is glitchy. Bear with me here. Okay, so we talked about the Preschool of the Arts, and we're really excited to work with them. And then the next one is the Yellow Brick Building Pilot Rent Relief Program. So at the December 12th council work session, council directed staff to provide a rent relief waiver for all the licensed childcare providers in the Yellow Brick, which we rolled out the rent relief application, and all of the programs in the Yellow Brick are participating. All 3 programs have applied, and to date, the rent waived for Q1 is $33,498. So it'll be more as Ajax Cubs opens as they open, because they weren't open in Q1. And the programs are still required to pay utilities, and the directors are also required to complete a narrative about however they're spending that money that they're not spending on rent, how that's benefiting their staff, because that was something you directed us to do. So we're making sure to meet with them during Q1 and find out how the rent relief waiver program is supporting recruitment and retention.
Very good.
I don't know if you have questions about that? No? Okay. And then the next piece is the wage enhancement program, which this is a program that is being provided to all of the child care centers in the city of Aspen. It's $500 a month to full-time and $250 a month to part-time teachers working within the city limits. So that goal, as you all probably remember, is to develop a plan for them to increase their revenue over the 5 years so that they can meet that difference. And we will provide leadership education. That's a really big piece that we heard from our advisory board. They want, and also from you all, to provide financial, business, and people management education to directors so that they can have really solid financial and leadership skills. So meeting with the directors and providing those educational opportunities for them. The first quarter checks for wage enhancement have been requested totaling $46,250. So that's supporting 33 full-time teachers and 1 part-time teacher in the 4 child care programs in the city of Aspen. So that's the 3 programs in the Yellow Brick and then the Preschool of the Arts.
Can I ask a question? Look, last time that we looked at this and made the decision to go forward with the wage enhancement program, there was also discussion that the county was putting money towards childcare, and we didn't want to have double dipping, and we're going to work on future coordination. Where is that landed? Are they doing that in a separate way now, or? so far?
So, and the double dipping comment, I want to be clear, was from the county.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
The
we
the
didn't- we
city
weren't worried
administration
about-
did not view it the same way.
That's right.
At all. Where the county is at is that they are providing support for a similar dollar amount. And they have funding because we've removed these 34 teachers from the pool at this point, and we think it'll go up, and teachers may be up to 50 by the time Ajax is fully open, Ajax Kids is fully open. That has allowed them to commit what they thought was 2.5 years' worth of funding to maybe stretch to 3 years. It will depend on a lot of factors if they get that whole additional 6 months by the city taking this portion of the expense over.
Okay.
And during that timeframe, we've asked them to come back to us with a game plan of how they will manage when that subsidy is no longer available to those providers.
Right.
Because some of the issues that they were concerned about will happen then if those subsidies go away without any
Ramping up the capacity of the agency.
Any funding that they are able to secure as they're hoping from philanthropic resources.
Thank you for the update on that, and appreciate their efforts. I mean, it all helps somewhere, and found a way to match it together.
Yeah, and for clarity too, that the funding they're using is federal funds that have been passed to them. They are not using locally generated tax dollars for this subsidy. That is why it's not an available ongoing expense for them.
That's right, it's ARPA funding, correct.
Great.
Right. Okay, so then the next, we have 2 other programs that we believe will impact recruitment and retention of teachers. We've got our VIP program. So this is an incentive program based on professional development. So teachers are assigned points based on education and professional development. So it's really designed to encourage further training and education. So the last cycle of the VIP incentive program paid out almost $55,000 to 55 teachers based on their participation in learning. And then our other program is the hiring bonus, excuse me, for new teachers. So new teachers get a $1,500 hiring bonus from Kids First, and between last September to this January, we paid 16 new teachers $16,000, and then if they stay with the child care program for 6 months, they get the additional $500. So we think these are things that are really going to help increase recruitment and retention.
There's a lot of employers outside of childcare who are offering the same sort of things, so it's very good.
It's true, and some of the child care programs are even matching this.
With their own support.
And you have there from September to January, onboarded 16 new teachers. That sounds very successful.
Yeah. It includes some of the Ajax Cubs teachers. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and there's a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
So, but we've got, basically 3 new programs opening up.
Very good.
It's exciting. And then the next piece around recruitment and retention is the wait list. And I know this is a long discussion that we've all had. And the Early Childhood Council employed Bridge Care as a way to connect families with childcare openings, but it also provides wait list information. But because the state basically hijacked Bridge Care as the software to implement universal preschool, they're putting our project on hold, which we weren't happy about, but there's not a lot we can do about it. In the meantime, we've partnered with our Early Childhood Council to collect real-time waitlist data, and they're willing to do that with us, to help us. So we're going to just keep plugging away at that, and I think that our program directors are, for whatever reason, more willing to provide us with that information than they were previously.
Is the intermittent step the same type of tool, or are we going back to
It's
paper?
just spreadsheets and people and, calculating ourselves. Because the software, it won't be available for a few months.
Is there anyone else who builds the software?
There is, and we considered employing them. The problem is requiring or just asking the child care providers to learn a whole new software and, put their information into it when they're going to have to do it anyways with Bridge Care.
Oh, I see.
And they already are in Bridge Care
I see.
for universal preschool.
I see.
It's just a lot to ask of them, and it's
Got it.
really what we call dumping their bucket, not filling their bucket. So if this is something that we can try to do in the interim to get real-time data, we're going to work hard to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the last project, generating funding to support the development of new childcare spaces, is really support for regional efforts. And these are different organizations that we participate in and are a part of, including the Early Childhood Coalition in Basalt, Rocky Mountain Early Childhood Council, and then Confluence Early Childhood Coalition. We're continuing to build relationships with those organizations. Confluence Early Childhood Coalition is proposing to establish the first early childhood special district in Colorado, which would create a publicly elected board with the goal to raise public funding stream for programs benefiting children from Aspen to Parachute. So this is a really big effort with a lot of people involved. I think there's like 47 partners, including construction companies and CoA and Aspen Community Foundation, and then all the school districts as well. So that's a big effort. And then Basalt Early Childhood Coalition, they're working to fill the Stotts Mill space, so that's an ongoing conversation. And as you know, CoA has dedicated a space in a new building at the Hub in Willits to childcare. And they already selected an operator, which is Michelle Ogre at Blue Lake. So that, I think they're aiming for 5 to 7 classrooms, but the price tag for that is, I think, $12 million. So that's a fundraising effort down there. And then the last one is Honey Tree in Elgibel, recently expanded to add 2 classrooms. So there is some expansion going on, which is pretty exciting. As you can see, we're working really hard on increasing capacity and supporting your goals, because they're ours as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, what questions do we have?
Thank you, Megan. Doing a great job.
Thank you.
Suspenseful.
We'll be back April 24th, so
Till then.
for more updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, during the transition, someone in the audience knows really well the childcare math. So the previous operator reported in 2019 of being open 180 days to us.
Got it.
So
Thank you for that.
that was for a minimum guarantee of 4 additional weeks or 20 additional days under the new contract with a provider who's anticipating on doing more than that.
Thank you.
I did say that the hours were longer, and it was pointed out to me it's only 15 minutes longer. So I would just want to make sure,
minutes are
full
longer.
transparency, that Ajax Kids is starting out as 8 to 4:15 for their operating hours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, good evening, Council.
Hello.
We're really excited to be in front of you twice this evening and made it easy by just having all of us up here all at once. So I'll do a quick round of introductions so you all know the team, and then we'll dive right in. So I'm Tessa Schreiner. I'm the Sustainability Manager.
Jimena Aldino, Waste Diversion and Recycling Specialist.
I'm Tim Koffs, the Sustainability Program Administrator.
Claire McLaughlin, Sustainability Administrator.
All right, so we'll kick this off just with a quick overview. So when Council set the carbon goal back in 2021, we came back with 5 areas within which we could demonstrate progress within the Council timeframe. So building energy use, waste reduction, transportation, long-range planning, and policy. So that's the framework of which we'll discuss this evening. So we'll start with buildings.
I'll kick us off with buildings. So a lot has been going on, exciting stuff. So in April, you all passed the Building IQ ordinance, and that requires energy and water benchmarking for certain commercial and multifamily properties over certain square feet. And we just finished our first year of working with commercial buildings 20,000 square feet and greater and city-owned buildings, which has been exciting to start to collect data that will help us make performance improvements on buildings across the city. Additionally, in June of this past year, you all passed ordinance establishing residential demolition and redevelopment standards. And finally, in January this year, City Council adopted updated building and energy codes. So the updated building and energy codes, which address energy performance and sustainability in new buildings, combined with what we're doing with Building IQ with existing buildings, those together are exciting way that we're going to be addressing our greenhouse gas emissions in the building sector. And for next steps, we're continuing to implement the benchmarking phase of Building IQ. So this year we're expanding to commercial buildings 15,000 square feet and greater, as well as city-owned buildings. We're continuing to adopt and implement the new building codes. And now through September, we'll be working with a stakeholder committee to develop building performance standards recommendations. We actually have our second meeting of that group next week on February 28th. So that's been a fun way to meet the community and hear what people think about the building performance standards.
Great.
Cool. On the waste reduction sector, last week we came to you guys and we presented the organics ordinance that prohibits the landfilling of organic waste. And the next steps on that, it's next week when we come for a second reading. And if passed, the first phase is going to be for restaurants are the biggest organic waste or food waste generators in Aspen, and that's going to start in the third quarter of 2023. We are also working with the community development and engineering departments on the construction and demolition waste, as C&D is the biggest material going to the landfill these days. Next week, we are also coming for this updated bag fee ordinance that it's gonna take into account the new statewide regulations on single-use bags. And we are also working on the single-use materials. And the first phase of that is gonna be a stakeholder outreach later this year.
Hi, Council. Here's some updates on your fleet electrification goal. So back in May last year, we Council directed staff to develop an internal fleet electrification plan, and we did that. We called it the Fleet Zero Emissions Roadmap to account for zero-emission vehicles and as well as electric vehicles. And the city fleet currently has 13 electric vehicles, including that achievement of the 5 Aspen Police Department Teslas, and one of them is seen wrapped in all its glory to the right. In 2023, staff will implement the roadmap and install additional charging stations. That's going to be really the focus of this stage. Gather information, focus on charging infrastructure, the policies needed to support that. And we will also continue to install chargers in the public right-of-way per the EV charging infrastructure master plan.
I'm going to jump in before we leave that one. I signed a sole source this morning for another all-electric vehicle, a new one we want to test. It's a Ford F-150 Lightning. Because of it is above the threshold where I can just actuate the purchase on my own, but they did need sole source approval. So you'll be seeing that come forward to you soon. We're pretty excited to add that to the fleet. We have a lot of different departments we want to test that in, but its home place will be in the police department to start with.
So there actually is availability of the Lightning now?
So the deal was we were going to be allowed to have one on loan for 3 weeks, and then they called and said, would you like to buy it? And we said, yes, we need to buy it to really test it, because we don't think 3 weeks lets us really put it through what a truck needs to. for our needs. We know there's towing challenges with this particular model, but maybe in town it'll be all right, but probably a little more difficult up to some of the water stations, water tanks. But just a little side note for you that that's moving forward and will be on your agenda shortly.
That's great. I'm looking for lightning.
You know, I just saw an article yesterday where a trash hauling company has now pioneered, has the first all-electric garbage and recycling truck. And it's a full-size looking vehicle. It's being tested. It's the main competitor with Waste Management. And it's more that, yes, these are coming. They are coming to replace even the most heavy-duty vehicles you think about. And they were saying how they think the waste hauling industry is particularly prime for electric vehicles because they spend so much time idling and emitting fumes now while they do their services. And they run this fixed route and they rest at night, and so they can recharge easily, things like that.
They're still going to emit fumes.
Yeah, a certain type, but not the, not the old type.
This is a little random, but I was reading about a new electric truck developer called Canoe, and they are producing light infantry trucks for the military. And the reason it's so good for the military is it doesn't leave a heat signature.
Did they look up what a canoe does?
It's just the brand name.
I was on the wait list for a canoe as well.
Yeah.
A Lightning, a canoe, and none of them became available.
Thank you.
I had kind of an overall question. Do we have to rename it to ASAP instead of Climate Action Plan?
You don't like that acronym? We feel.
I'm an old dog, you know.
Yeah, understandably. Yeah, it's been known as the Climate Action Plan for quite a long time.
I think it's a great acronym for this, as soon as possible.
Yeah, I see the wisdom in the acronym, but as we come back to the restaurant thing, we've identified that it's an emergency, climate emergency, and comments on the 14th to ramp it in a shorter period of time.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah. On the policy front, staff are engaged in and actively influencing climate and environmental policy through organizations such as the Colorado Communities for Climate Action, CC4CA, which many of you know. The Mountain Pact is another one of our partners, and also Climate Mayors. You know, we're actively tracking state and federal funding opportunities, so we're kind of leveraging our space as a small community and our voice at these larger, bigger platforms.
And just a note on the policy piece, we're really actively tracking the big climate bills that have been gone through, like the IAJA and the IRA infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. Just for reference, we're really closely tracking those opportunities, and the state is really heavily involved and has already applied for funding through that.
Yeah, the CML meetings on Thursday and Friday, which we had staff with Jen attending as well as myself, they had a representative from the National League of Cities there who talked about all the staffing they had available to help review applications, and a few tips that if you're denied, you can request a review as to why you were denied, what you could do to improve your application, resubmit. But it really had policy experts in any number of areas, whether it's transportation, water, roads, and they were just, as many are, overwhelmed with how much potential funding is coming through and how to get it out to the right communities. So I think that's a resource for you guys as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the final piece of our update this evening is long-range planning, which is very relevant because we will be bringing the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan to you all this evening for approval. As you're aware, the update of the ASAP incorporates the action that, in our roadmap to get to our science-based targets, which you can see on the screen are 63% reduction by 2030 and 100% by 2050. The plan addresses all the things of our inventory, greenhouse gas inventory, and the things we've discussed this evening, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in just a minute here, so I won't dive into that now. And that is our overall update for the climate goal.
Nice.
Get on that ASAP.
It's a layup.
I know that we've asked this a couple times throughout, but wanted to ask whether you have any questions for us. But before we do that, I did want to point out that we have a goal-setting session that's, I think, scheduled for May 22nd, although there's an alternative date if we need it. And just wanted to open it up if you had any other questions for us.
I have more comment. I think it's really good to have these updates. We're sitting at the table here and we get so absorbed in the question in front of us. And when we complete something, we have a tendency of forgetting about it. And when we come back and look at what we've tasked you with and what staff has accomplished, I feel good about the direction we're going. And I think Steve Skadron, when I decided to run a second time, he said, sit down and start writing everything that's been accomplished in the last 4 years and you'll be amazed. So I think that it's important to review, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Want me
Ward.
to do the same thing?
Comments, questions?
I have a comment.
No, that's Rachel.
It's on, okay, I get it here. Thank you. I would ditto Ward's comments, really appreciate the update and where things are going, both for us at the table and for our viewing public to see what's going on. I really only have one comment kind of on our last panel, and the building IQ is really just to point out how very important it is that we're beginning this sort of work now, given the water crisis that's approaching all of us. So, we may have started focusing it on energy use related to climate, which is also related to water, but within our county, we have conditional water rights for 20% additional diversions of our water to the Front Range. We're already diverted about 38%, maybe 40%, but the conditional water rights that remain that those holders could come out and perfect really would hurt our community, our rivers, our gold medal fishery. And the Aspen Daily News had a very good story about that today, that we're just facing new challenges. So it's great to see a good snow year. I hope it all makes it into the rivers and into the soil and doesn't just sublimate into the atmosphere. But this is very timely and very important work for our community's sustainability in those areas. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I'd also like to mirror what Ward and Rachel are saying. I look at this list: building IQ, residential demolition redevelopment standards, updated building and energy codes, prohibiting landfilling organic waste, and starting our electrification of our fleet. And this is just in the last year and 3/4 since I've been on council, and I'm proud to be part of this board with you 4 people. Thank you. And thanks to staff. We couldn't have done any of this without you. These are really important things we're doing here. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we wrap up this goal-setting update today, just want to let you know what will happen over the next couple of months, because with a seating of a new council, we'll always go back into the goal-setting process. So as Jen mentioned, we've tentatively scheduled that for Monday, May 22nd to occur. And in April and May, there will be a work session specifically on each of your 3 major goal areas as part of the prep work for that discussion on May 22nd. And we'll be looking to the council about if there's additional topics we should do in depth as preparation prior to that discussion on May 22nd. So just be thinking about that if there's additional topics, and candidates, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out about how that works. And we can make sure that you have as much information from staff ahead of time, so the time on the 22nd is really your conversation, and we can be in the background for technical assistance as you need it. Thank you.
Just to comment on that, I won't be at that meeting. But I really would like us to consider, is there a way we can do some sort of collection on plastic bags? And, the county discontinued collecting plastic bags because they said it took too long to fill a big semi-truck with a big enough load to take to a recycling center or a reuse center or something, and that the plastic bags actually started deteriorating at some level, and so they couldn't do it. But you go to the grocery store, it's hard to bring a dinner home without 3 new plastic bags, whether it's in the salad, whether it's the frozen food, whether it's, the bread's in a plastic bag, your potatoes are, it's just everything. And it would just be something for people to think about as a future goal. But is there a way that we could start collecting plastic bags that could be recycled or something like that? That's just,
You can drop them off at the Rio Grande Recycling Center. They don't pick them up, but we've been gathering up bags and dropping bags of bags down there.
I was unaware of that. I know that City Market has now put in a small plastic bag collection thing downstairs by the restrooms. I'm not sure how many people are aware of that, but they have that as one of their sustainability policies. But I just think we need to find a way to eliminate that waste as well. Thank you. But thank you for that, Ward. I hadn't seen that.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
thank you, guys.
Oh, we got another one? Are we done? One more.
Gonna get a little closer to the ASAP.
Do it immediately. ASAP.
That's a great acronym.
Who knows? They tried to make an acronym out of the planet's on fire, but it didn't work out so well.
I always think of that Phil Collins song, it definitely predates you.
My awareness of Phil Collins is limited to him being brought up as a name in a South Park episode when I was a kid, and I know nothing else.
I guess I'm gonna have to look
That's really sad.
That you
Deeply,
don't know
deeply
Phil
sorry.
Collins.
Deeply
Who's
sorry.
Phil Collins? No, just
He's referencing an Eminem song as well, but I don't know.
What's the genesis of that?
The Eminem song or Phil Collins?
That's a bad pun.
Oh, is there a Genesis? Is that part of Phil Collins'
Phil Collins is
repertoire?
part of
Was one of the bands he was part of, yes.
We're learning so much here today, guys.
Gabriel was also part of Genesis.
I love Peter Gabriel.
Yeah, there you go.
He's a good guy. What a guy.
So much of the council.
What a guy. That guy.
All right. Let's talk a little ASAP.
Love it. Let's talk ASAP.
Rescue me.
All right. Well, hello again. I'm Tessa Schreiner for the Good of the Public. I am the Sustainability Manager.
Jimena Valdina, Waste Diversion and Recycling Specialist.
Tim Koff's the Sustainability Programs Administrator.
Claire McLaughlin, Sustainability Programs Administrator.
I know this may seem like really new information.
Black cat, someone grab a gun.
All right. Well, we're here tonight to give you a brief presentation on the update of our what used to be known as the Climate Action Plan and is now known as the ASAP, or the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan, to address the comment, which I think is very valid, that we've called it the Climate Action Plan for years.
Yeah.
And similar to my title, which changed from Climate Action Manager to Sustainability Manager, sustainability encompasses more than just climate work. And so we felt that the need to shift how we speak about climate and incorporating equity and economic development needs to be adaptive in how we talk about our Climate Action Plan, or the ASAP, Sustainability Action Plan. So our request of council, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I support the name change because of what you just said about how it is a little bit more encompassing and really focuses on some of our priorities. The only thing I would say, though, is that, the term Climate Action Plan is traded around from community to community a lot. So, I know that it won't happen that this gets lost or forgotten, but I just wanted to point out that, yeah, Climate Action Plan has been around a lot of the meetings that I attend with other mountain towns. They've requested of us, can we see your cap, so.
Great.
But I appreciate the name change because
Yeah.
I think it is honing in on our priorities.
Yeah, and I think this can be referred to interchangeably, CAP, and I think this can be referred to interchangeably. It's the same exact format and reflection of our inventory and just a slight change in name, but I appreciate that, thank you.
I mean, I like the ASAP as well, but I would could see it being Aspen Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. It's just a thought. Yeah, it gets a little longer.
You know, it's kind of a double branding, like we have building IQ and benchmarking.
Yeah, yeah. Anyhow, it's just a theoretical.
Sounds like it.
We'll take
Or
that.
maybe
into-
that's a subtitle underneath it.
Sure, yeah. We could definitely consider how we would communicate
You
that
can
better.
subtitle it.
ASAP,
Perfect.
formerly known as
Maybe we can get a symbol,
artist formerly known as Prince.
a little globe.
Awesome. All right, so we have a brief presentation for you tonight, and we're going to go over previous council action, a little background on how we got here, the ASAP itself and some of the key takeaways, although we're not going to spend this evening going deep into the weeds of the plan itself, and council direction and discussion, and then what implementation and next steps look like for this plan.
Okay, so the ASAP is in support of council's carbon goal. It is part of the City of Aspen's Race to Zero commitment. It helps achieve our science-based targets, which, as Tessa alluded earlier, is a 63% reduction by 2030 and then a 100% reduction by 2050. Those are in support of our fair share of emissions reductions as part of, you know, the signing on to the Paris Climate Accord. The data and assumptions used in our ASAP are part of I used data and assumptions from the 2017 greenhouse gas emissions inventory and also the 2017 climate action plan.
2020 emissions inventory.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah. Which you see on your screen in front of you.
And to provide some background, here's what climate change already looks like in Aspen. This graph shows that each year we're getting increasingly warmer temperatures. And so that has a variety of impacts on our local way of life and our community in itself. So just to reflect on that previous graph, higher warming temperatures means higher energy demand. That means more cooling degree days, more air conditioning use, and that has a range of impacts there. Especially seen in years past, changes in snowpack have huge impacts to recreation, and drought in the American West, as Rachel alluded to earlier, is going to be a persistent issue that we're going to be dealing with always. Water shortages, that's in terms of our ability to collect and store water, have strong impacts to agriculture and municipal energy production in the form of 100% renewable energy resource, hydroelectricity. And then finally, severe wildfire is a visceral impact that is we've seen impact homes and also our local ecosystems. And we're seeing that at play with the updates to our building code that call for provisions that add wildfire resiliency to new development.
So a little more background here on Aspen's role in climate action. So the City of Aspen has been a leader in climate action for decades, and you can see on your screen a few highlights. So the Climate Action Office, formerly known as the Canary Initiative, was formed in 2005. In 2006, we partnered with the Aspen Global Change Institute to create the first local climate effects study, the Climate Change in Aspen Plan. And then in 2017, we published our last CAP, and there's been many progressive policy decisions and projects in between, but these are just to highlight a few. And that leads us to where we are today, which is our 2023 update to that 2017 CAP, the ASAP. And at a glance, the ASAP is our climate roadmap. It's how we are going to be making progress on our climate goals. And it is the guiding document for hitting those science-based targets and our 2030 and 2050 goals, and to do our part in reducing our global emissions. So the ASAP is broken into 5 sectors, which reflect the areas from the greenhouse gas emissions study that Tim mentioned: energy supply, buildings, aviation and airport, transportation, and waste. And it contains 58 action items across those sectors.
These 5 guiding principles that you can see on the screen are the ones that emerge while developing this plan. We have equitable as we prioritize community members most in need. We also have collaborative, as to accomplish this plan, we need internal and external collaboration. We have adaptable, as we will continue to update this plan based on the community needs. We have the scope, as the contents in this plan are in the city scope of control and direction, and we have the co-benefits, as most of the objectives and action items in this plan have co-benefits. So for the implementation of the plan, we need the help of the community, as we know the what, but we need the community guidance on how we can build new programs, we can offer support, provide resources, and change policies. We also need the regional collaboration, as greenhouse gases know no boundaries, and that means we need to work ASAP, work smart and fast, because we are facing a climate crisis and we need to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. And finally, we will incorporate the adaptation and resilience, and while we face new climate realities along the Roaring Fork Valley.
So the process of developing this plan was about a year in the making, and we took stakeholder engagement really seriously in the development of this plan. So we met one-on-one with 50 stakeholders, both within the city and external partners. They represented 17 different organizations in the valley. And the purpose of these really specific and intentional one-on-one meetings with these stakeholders was to ensure that we had alignment within, not only within our own departments, to make sure that this plan represents not just the climate team's work, as it should not, but the entire city of Aspen across all of our departments, and to ensure alignment with other communities and partners, nonprofit and public sector, private sector, that we're all moving in the same direction. The second is to get authentic input. So we got really good feedback from this group of what the city can and should do, what we need to prioritize, where we need to come back and revisit this and get new input from the community. And then where we can collaborate on the actual implementation. And one of the feedback pieces that we got, which I think is something that we've taken really seriously in building this kind of next evolution of this plan, is to make it more iterative and adaptable, to allow for more ongoing community input, that it's not just a plan that lives in its kind of current state for 5 to 7 years, but that is reflective of flexibility, of feedback, so that we can be a bit more adaptable to the community's needs, to shifting priorities, to shifting opportunities or more opportunities, and that the community feels that way is a bit more open for iteration, and that, we can be a bit more flexible. So in brief, our request for council is to give us the thumbs up to move forward with the Aspen Sustainability Action Plan and to generally support its implementation over the next 5 to 7 years. Great. Any questions or comments, and then I can go into the next steps of implementation. All right. So now that we have you all's literal thumbs up, we will move forward with adopting this as our new roadmap and living document. We're going to continue to meet with community stakeholders on implementation. We're going to measure progress and success to highlight what we've done in the previous year in an annual sustainability report, which we're going to start this year. So that will be something that we can share that will help us and council and others say what we've accomplished in the sustainability climate realm in the previous year. We will return to council annually with this progress report and small updates to the ASAP. So as we mentioned, we'll come back and we'll be like, here's what we accomplished, here's what we have left to do, here's some input that we received from the community, and if needed, make any small adjustments to the ASAP to reflect that. And then the last bullet, we, in October, during the budget work session, council asked us what it would look like to accelerate this work. So yes, this is really important work, and what this would look like to move it even faster. And so we'll be coming back in May to bring that to you all of what those options could be for council direction and discussion. And all of that would be based in the recommendations of the ASAP, wouldn't be separate from that. So we'll be back to you in May.
Tess, I'd like you to continue to remind people, not only the stakeholders, but the public, of the outreach that you're doing and the feedback you're getting. A couple of weeks ago, when I was checking in with the restaurants, that you had done stakeholder or restaurant check-ins in 21, 22, and some of these people just totally forgot about that. So to remind the people that, oh, by the way, we talked to you about this in 2022. Remember that discussion? Where are we going with it? And have you had any further thoughts? Just not only to remind the public, but to remind the people that you actually interfaced with.
Yeah, and to tie on to that, a lot of transition and change has happened in every restaurant. And what people may have told you 2 years ago, given the employee shortage, might be different than what they'll tell you now.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we're going to every restaurant in Aspen this week as a team to do outreach in response.
Well, the people you talk to won't be here next year, but.
True. But they will be this week.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that is our agenda. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
As always, I want to say thank you to GrassRoots.
Thank you, everybody. Good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
I wonder why the majority of the audience left before the meeting was over. Sad.
Sarah, really well done. Like, just how, I can see that you gave them your expectations